Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a review, and I'd like to introduce our author of LUZ, Debra Thomas. Debra Thomas. Debra, welcome. I'm so glad to speak with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
And can you hold up your book? Now, my cover doesn't have that lovely seal on there. Tell us about that. You've already won an award.
I know. I'm just thrilled and just humble and such an honor. It was the 2020 Next Generation Indie Book Award in Multicultural Fiction. And I was just thrilled when I got the email congratulating me. So there's my little sticker. Yeah, I'm so proud of it.
Well, you should be. So I am going to introduce Debra, and I just want to read the back of the book to just give you a little sense of what the story is about. It was just published. Today is June 10th, 11th?
Yeah. 10th. It was published yesterday.
And it was published yesterday. So it's very exciting. I'm getting to talk to you so early in your efforts to launch your book, and I'm very pleased to do that. So let me just tell you a little bit about it. On the back cover says, Alma wishes her willful teenage daughter Luz could know the truth about her past. But there are things that Luz can never know about the journey Alma took to the US to find her missing father. In 2000, 3 years after the disappearance of her father, who left, you'll have to help me pronounce Oaxaca, to work on farms in California, Alma set out on a perilous trek north with her sister Rosa. What happens once she reaches the US is a journey from despair to hope. Timeless in its depiction of the depths of family devotion and the blaze of first love, LUZ conveys with compassion and insight the plight of those desperate to cross the US border. So this is a very timely book. I did get to read this book. I got an early copy. I got this copy when I ordered it from bookshop.org, and that helped my local bookstore, but I read it when it was a manuscript. So I was very pleased to be able to do that. And I have my review that I'll be posting along with this interview. But it was really, for me, the thing that really struck me was how it's such a tender story about a family and the importance of family and a daughter's search for her father, and that was a very important part for me to read. So let me ask you a few questions, Debra. What led you to write this story?
Well, my answer spans decades, so I hope I don't ramble on too much. It began in the 1990s when I was teaching English as a second language to adults from all over the world. But most of my students were from Mexico and Central America. And I felt such a genuine connection with them, probably because they reminded me of my Italian upbringing. Their language sounded so much like Italian. The music, the ranchera music, reminded me of the music my grandfather played with his small accordion, his squeeze-a-box, as he called it. That's what I thought it was called for years. The food, the religion, the Catholic religion, the Virgin Mary, Virgin of Guadalupe, so many things. I just felt a connection. And this was at a time in my life when I was having some personal problems, and I was 3,000 miles away from my family. And being with them made me feel like I was with family. So from the beginning, I felt a very, very fierce connection. But at the same time, in the 90s, I was reading week after week after week in the newspaper about the migrant deaths in the desert. And I knew that there had been terrible problems with the Mexican economy in the 90s after a North American free trade agreement, that the peso was devalued and migrants were just coming across the border. And so our government responded with Operation Gatekeeper in California, Operation Safeguard in Arizona, where they put up more fences, high-tech lighting, underground sensors in an attempt to, they said, prevent by deterrence. But no one was deterred. They were so desperate, they were pushed further east into the deserts and the treacherous mountain passes, and they were dying week after week. And it just broke my heart to read this, to hear about it on the news, and to hear my students talk about it. So I turned to some activism. I got involved in Amnesty International, immigrant and refugee rights specialty, and I was able to tour a detention center, which is just like a prison. I went on a trip to Nogales, Mexico, Nogales, Arizona, and spoke with people on both sides of the border. That was quite an eye-opening experience. And I also became involved in the Water Stations Project. Father Richard Estrada, Enrique Morones, and John Hunter had this organization where people would come together, volunteers, to go out into the desert and leave water marked by blue flags, you know, to try to help anyone who was dying of dehydration. So all of this had quite an effect on me. And as a writer, it was constantly on my mind, and that's what I wanted to write about. So at first, I did what I thought I should do. I took what I call the Barbara Kingsolver approach. And I wrote from the point of view of a woman like me, Italian-American woman, who comes from New York to Los Angeles. And even though the story is about her and her family, it also involves a little bit of what was happening in the desert. Just like Barbara Kingsolver did with her books. She would have like The Bean Trees was a white Southern girl who goes on a journey but finds out about the sanctuary movement and the Guatemalan refugees fleeing violence. So I wrote that first draft, set it aside. And then that summer, I saw UCLA was offering a class by Gail Brandeis, winner of the Barbara Kingsolver Award for Fiction of Social Justice. And I took a class with her. And in my assignment, I started writing in the voice of this young Mexican girl whose migrant farm worker father disappeared crossing the border. And I didn't feel like, you know, well, should I or could I? It was just an assignment. So I went with it, and it just flowed. It was the most fluid writing experience I've ever had. And as a writer, you know how difficult writing can be.
Right.
Her voice was just so genuine. And I just kept going with it to see, well, let's see where it would go. And the other characters were from Guatemala or Mexico, and they were people I knew. Her voice was the voice of everyone that I had met or listened to or read about. And so I just went with it. And initially I tried to get it published. I had a hard time finding an agent, as we all do. It took me actually a couple years. Finally found an agent who did a great job and got it into the hands of some of the top publishers, but ultimately they passed. It was a tough time, 2008, 2009, the recession, and where a lot of editors were being let go, and I was told it was the worst time to publish. I put it aside, I was devastated. And then a few years later, I attended a conference in Monterey, and I met Elizabeth McKenzie, a writer and editor. And over lunch, she heard me talk about this experience, and she said, I want to read that manuscript. She read it and said, you have got to put your blood, sweat, and tears into getting that back out there. And she gave me wonderful advice on how to revise it. So it took me a while, stop and start, and I did. I poured my heart into revising. And then I contacted Alma Luz Villanueva. She is a Mexican-American writer, Yaqui descent, and she lives in San Miguel de Allende, has lived there for 15 years, so was a perfect writer who had experience with Mexico and America, a Latina writer, and I contacted her and asked her if she would read it and give me her opinion. And at first she said, well, why are you writing this? And so I wrote a very passionate, long email saying all my experiences. And she wrote back and said, well, you're not Latina, but you've borne witness to La Luz, so send me the manuscript. So I sent her the manuscript. My heart was pounding for weeks. And when I heard from her, it was just so wonderful and encouraging. And as you know, she ended up writing the foreword for it. And I'm so indebted to her and to Gail and to Elizabeth. And that's where Luz came from. I'm sorry, it was a long seed, but it's decades.
Well, what I love about your book is that it's teaching me. It taught me so much. You read in the newspapers, you hear the different stories, but when you read a book that really gets into the heart and soul of the people that have done that kind of a trip, you portray the difficulties so well. Um, you're teaching other people about this time as well. So I'm wishing you the best of luck as teachers. We are both previously teachers, and our students are dear to our hearts, and that shows that you really care about the characters. Um, I want to change the topic a little bit. The cover is gorgeous, just gorgeous. So we have to show that again. And tell me about the significance of the calla lily, which I also see you have.
Yes, my husband bought me this is a little pin, and also the scarf has calla lilies on it. Yeah, calla lilies. I've loved that flower since I first came out to Southern California and saw those beautiful white trumpet flowers. My daughter Claire even carried it at my wedding. When I married my husband Bruce, she held a single one. I've always loved it. So when I was writing Alma's story, and her father, who was so proud of her schoolwork, and I thought, well, he would probably put stickers or stars on her schoolwork when he would come home from his being away. And so I thought, okay, she's got a little wooden box. And I had seen so many beautiful painted boxes that have been done, from many cultures. And I thought, oh, how about a blue one with a white calla lid? It's a wooden box. She keeps her stickers and stars in it, and that her dad, uses to put on her schoolwork when he comes back. But it also contains other treasures, and she's going to take this on her journey with her, and she's searching for him. And then, of course, she finds a journal, a blank journal with the same kind of look that her boyfriend Manuel buys for her, and she makes that into her math journal. Calla lilies, to me, the white is innocence and purity. The fact that they're spring flowers, it's new beginnings, and then they are perennials, so they come back every year. And to me, that was rebirth, resilience, and hope. So then when She Writes Press, that, as you know, does the best covers, they asked me what idea I had. I said, well, gosh, maybe the blue background with the one white calla lily. It took a while for us to get the flame right, but Rebecca Lone is the name of the person who did my cover. Did a beautiful job.
Yes, she did. It's gorgeous. So you wrote with such detail about the people crossing the border. And how did you get to be able to do that? Were your students helpful in that? Did they give you stories?
A little bit came from them, but of course they were very reticent to say too much. But they certainly told me a few little details, but it was mostly reading newspapers, articles. I think I remember this was in the 90s, late 90s, documentaries. I remember the movie El Norte, although they don't cross the desert so much. And then I did spend just a few hours in the desert myself with Water Stations Project. Just a few hours is nothing, but just to imagine what it would be like to have to walk for hours and days. And so most of it was and there was a book I remember called Mexican Voices, American Dreams, that told point of view from various stages before the passage, those left behind. It was written, I think it was written in the 90s. So mostly it was a lot of reading and imagining.
So your story does contain some actual events that happened. Are any of the characters based on real people?
None of them are real. Alma isn't anybody in particular. They're all my imagination. Of course, I'd read a lot about when she gets to Ana and her mother from Guatemala. I had read, as Amnesty International, I'd read a lot about the violence in Guatemala back then. And but as far as an actual character, obviously Dolores Huerta. She is a real person, as everyone knows. And the events about the farm workers' strike, the events about Dolores's life, her aortic aneurysm, all the marches that she was in, the awards she won, her wonderful foundation, Dolores Huerta Foundation, all of that was real.
So the narrator of your story is Alma. And Alma is the young woman that's looking for her father, and it's her journey, and then the journey of her life. And you mentioned before a book that has the calla lily on it, and it's a journal that she keeps. But that was a pretty unusual journal in that she didn't write her like a diary of a young woman would maybe write what she's thinking. She wrote about math. Why math?
Oh boy. Well, that's Gail Brandeis's fault in a way. During that class that I took back in 2004, one of the assignments was to break the form in some way. You know, just see what you can do different than just continuing with the narrative. And I'm racking my brain. What could I do? What could I do? And then I thought, I remembered Like Water for Chocolate and the recipes. Remember the recipes throughout the novel, Like Water for Chocolate, and the recipes had something to do with each chapter. They weren't just thrown in there. And I thought, well, Alma loves school. She loves math. I'm going to do math problems. Now, I have to say, if you asked me to do a math problem today, I wouldn't be able to. But at that time when I wrote it, I had just finished preparing for something called the CBEST exam. I was working on my single subject credential. I had had a master's degree in English, but you can't teach in California with that. You have to have a single subject credential. California, special tests, special classes, and I wanted to work in the public high school, which I ended up doing for 10 wonderful years. But anyway, I had to study for the CBEST, which included brushing up on math. And mind you, I was approaching 50. I didn't remember my math. And so I had studied, and that's why it was fresh in my mind. And I still had my review book. So I was able to pick out some different areas and come up with math problems that touched on what was happening to her, and so that it would have something to do with moving the story along.
Well, who is your most beloved character?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer. It's like saying, who's your favorite child, right? And mine are listening. So I love them all very much. Obviously, Alma, Rosa, you know, Manuel, Ana, everyone. But my favorite character is Berta. Berta, you could write a story about her life. She had so much love to give, and everyone she loved, many that she loved died. She lost them. And yet she continued to love again and again and again. She had so much love to give. I love her. And she loves to cook and bake. So I would love to go sit in her kitchen and have her cook and bake for me. So
I don't think it would give too much away to say that Berta was so important when Alma finally arrived in the country and needed someone to guide her and help her. And Berta was a substitute sister, mother, friend, all of that. And so she was a very important character. I really liked Berta as well.
Yeah.
So our novels, I see mine on the back of on your counter, on your bookshelf rather, and my novel Freedom Lessons also. We have a common trait in that we wrote stories of others. As a white woman, I wrote a story of 50 years ago, and I wrote from the point of view of a white woman, a Black woman, and a Black teenager. And oh, thank you. And we know that there are some thoughts about that and in writing across differences, but you did mention already that, you know, writing across differences, it's also that you earlier in our conversation today, you recognized the things that you saw that were the same. It's not just about the differences, but recognizing the things that are the same. And my book is historical fiction, and I really believe that we learn to have some empathy for others by reading about the real experiences that people have, whether they're fictionalized or not. So what are your views about writing across differences? How did you how did you vet yourself?
Well, like I said, I think what helped me when I was writing was not really knowing where this was going to go and if it would go anywhere, if I would try to get it published. It just came out of me and I let it go. And then when I was ready, I was self-conscious because I was very aware of cultural appropriation, and I very much supported the Own Voices movement. And I think it's so important that all voices are heard. And what Reina Grande said, it's true. Some voices are silenced and others elevated. And probably the best thing that came out of American Dirt controversy was the fact that the publishing industry was taken to task for not letting many voices be heard and celebrated and awarded with money and awards and stuff. So that was a good thing. So yes, I was very, very self-conscious about it. And that is why I contacted Alma Luz Villanueva, as I said, someone I highly respected to read and give me her opinion. And she certainly supported and encouraged. But I did a lot of research as well. I read a few articles. I wrote an essay called Finding Common Ground, which is on women's writers, women's books right now. And in it, I talk about the different writers who've written about this. And the fact, like Daniel Jose Older, who wrote the 12 Fundamentals of Writing About the Other. And he said, you know, you got to admit right up front that you don't know what you're talking about. You did not experience it. And that's true. And I respect when people say that to me. How do you know? You didn't go through this. No, I didn't. I can use my imagination and hope to capture the essence of truth, but no, I didn't. I can just hope that I can bring a story that might come close and that someone might read and their heart might be opened. Rebecca McKay, who wrote a wonderful novel about the gay community and the AIDS crisis, she wrote also about writing across difference. And she talked about the fact that you have to really say, why did I write this? You have to do so much research and thinking to make it broad. And you should have a sensitivity reader so they can tell you if you missed something.
Right.
So I tried to do all those things. And I was really encouraged when I saw Reina Grande speak at the panel with Oprah, when she said that she believes storytellers should be able to write what speaks to their heart as long as they do it with honesty, integrity, and responsibility. And I certainly tried to do that. And I tried to cover my bases, but I respect that some people might not agree. And I can just hope that there will be many people out there who will read it and be moved. And
well, I hope so too. I mean, I had the similar experience in that I had sensitivity readers. I had two African-American authors read my book. I had a historical fiction historian, rather, check my facts. I also looked at Ellen O. Also has things to say about, you know, we need diverse books, and that's the hashtag Own Voices comes from her work. And she recommends that if you are ready to write about Indigenous and people of color, that you really need to tell the story properly or be prepared for questions or criticism. And I think, you know, I believe after reading your book and hearing your story that you did a good job about being honest and open, and the message that you're sending is one of hope and love. There's so much, and I think right now today, I think we all need to learn how to listen to each other, and reading can help us to do that as well.
And I just want to add also, I felt like, and we had talked about this a little earlier, that the concept of finding common ground, shared experiences, shared humanity, that we can be different. And maybe I don't know what it is to cross the border, but I know what it is to love and lose a parent. I know what it is to have a fierce bond with my family. And so anyone can relate to a father who would do anything to help support his family, and a daughter who is desperate to find her father. And remember, she's searching for him, not just because she loves him so desperately, which she does, but because she's lost her own dream. He was the one that supported her to go to school and become whatever she wanted to be. He's gone now, and her life is of poverty. She doesn't have that opportunity. And so a part of it is she wants to reclaim the life that she dreamed of. So, and we all can relate to that. So I feel like we can write across differences, but we can also touch on where we're common, where our shared humanity is.
Yes. And I love the title of your recent article, Finding Common Ground, and that's important too. So what do you hope that readers will take away from your book?
Well, I think what I would like them to take away would be to go back to the beginning with my epigraphs, especially Mary Oliver's, where she talks about breaking your heart open so it never closes again to the rest of the world, which I think is so beautiful to see today across our country. So many hearts are open and listening and voices together. So I would hope that my readers would come away with that thought, as well as Martin Luther King's darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love. And I know my students probably got tired of hearing me say it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And I'm just thrilled at all the candles that are shining right now across our country. And I hope that my little LUZ is another small candle being held up, a light of hope.
I think that it is. Beautiful book, beautiful book. And where can people get your book?
Well, they can order it anywhere. I could say go to the bookstore, but we can't yet. They can order it anywhere. I would recommend your local independent bookstore. You can go to bookshop.org or IndieBound, and of course Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can order it anywhere.
Yes,
I always recommend your local indie bookstore.
Yes, our books are available anywhere, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm so excited to be able to have spoken with you today, Debra.
I appreciate it, and best of luck to you and your beautiful book, Freedom Lessons. That belongs in every high school curriculum.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so we will say farewell.
Thank you.